Hi guys, so in this video we're going to be looking at the drawing workspace and how to generate technical drawings based off those wonderful designs that you've made. So let's jump into Fusion and give it a go. So once we're on Fusion, we're going to want to change our workspace once again. So we're going to click the workspace option in the top left. And this time we're going to go to drawing and we're going to create one from a design. So it's going to ask you some details about the drawing that you're going to create, whether you want to make it from a full assembly, from the items or the components that are only visible, or whether you want to actually hand select which ones to include. So we're just going to go with the visible only. It'll ask you some of the details about the drawing that we're going to make. And a good one to be aware of in terms of student coursework is working to this ISO standard. So you can get the students to talk about, as engineers, we have to work to certain international standards, and that's just a good one in terms of picking up those easy marks. So I'm happy with the sheet size and my units, so I'm just going to click OK, and that drawing should now generate. Give it a second just to wind up, and there we go. So the first thing it's going to ask me to do, it's going to ask me to drop a base view. So this is our starting and originating view. So it allows you to choose the orientation of this. So I'm just going to go with that right view. And it's just giving me an option to drop this wherever I need to be. So I'm just going to drop this in the middle since it's my base view. I can also select the style that I want it to be. So I'm just going to stick with visible edges. And I'm also going to set my scale factor. So that drawing's quite small. So I'm going to go with 1:3. That looks quite nice. And I can choose which edges I want to include. I'm just going to leave it as it is and just click OK. So you'll now see that that base view has now dropped there. For each view, it will also once again drop it into your browser. And you can choose whether to include certain aspects of them. So you can show and hide certain aspects. So maybe you might want to hide things like different buttons. But for now, I'm just going to make sure they're all visible. So the first thing that I would do is, again, follow that left to right journey along the top. So we've already dropped the base view. So we're just going to go on to a projected view. Now, to do this, you have to select a parent view. So that just means what's the original view that we're going to project into another drawing view. So this is the only one there. So I'm obviously going to select this one. And then what you'll notice is whichever way I drag this out, it's going to drop that as our projected view. If you want an isometric view, you can also go diagonal and it'll drop an isometric view there as well. But for now, I'm just going to stick with orthographic. So I'm just going to left click and drop a view at each side. Then once you've dropped those views where you need them to be, just click this green tick and it'll just generate those extra drawing views as well. So it's looking quite nice. And as I said before, with that parent view, because these other views are based on that, if I then move my parent view along by clicking and dragging, you'll see that the other views move with it. That can sometimes just make things a bit easier in terms of where you place things. So now that we've created that, we're going to go over to create again, and we're going to skip past auxiliary view, and we're just going to go on to section view. So what this will do is it will just create that cross section of one of your drawings. So I'm going to select this one at the top as my parent view. And then it's going to ask me to select where I want that start point to be. So I'm going to want mine to cut relatively through the middle. So what I'm going to do for that is if I zoom into this drawing, you'll notice that it's going to lock in to that midpoint there when that triangle appears. If you then, rather than clicking there, if you then just drag the mouse in line with that, you'll see that dashed line appear. That just showing me that when I'm starting this is in line with that midpoint. So I'm going to drop that view there. Then I'm going to do the same again. I'm going to try and follow that dashed line, and I'm going to drop the next point down here. Once you've done that, just click the tick again, and then it'll generate this nice section view. So again, we can't actually drag this above or below. It has to be in line with these arrows. So I'm just going to drag it to this side, and you'll notice that whichever way you drag it, it changes which direction you're looking at it from. So I'm just going to go with off to the right and drop it in this space here by left clicking. You can also, once again, change the style, the scale, and also some of the other things such as the depth. So I'm just going to leave it as it is, but I'm just going to scale this up a tiny bit more. So you'll notice that in scale, it does it from the parent view, so this will match. You can then, if you like, simply delete that, and I'm going to go with a 1:2 scale instead. I'm going to want this to just be a little bit bigger. And you can also name this view. So I'm just going to call this one internals because it's showing some of those internal components. And then just click OK once you're happy with it. And again, it's going to use these hatchings just to show where that material is. If you don't like the way these hatchings look for whatever reason, if you left click on them and then double click, you can then change different things based on those hatchings as well. So now that this view has dropped here, I can do the same again in terms of moving it around. I can left click on it, and then I can drag it left to right along that path. But you also end up with a title for that view this time as well. So it works in the same way. If you left click on it, you can then use these arrows to change the position, or you can use this circle and just drop it where you need it to drop. So I'm just going to leave it there. It looks nice, and it'll also give you that scale factor in the brackets there as well. So next, if I just move my floating head out the way, is we're going to move along again. So this time we're going to select a detail view. So the clue's in the name of this one. What it does is it just zooms into a certain section of your model. So I am going to choose this section here at the bottom, and then I'm just going to zoom in again. You can also use these tools at the bottom in terms of navigating this interface. So you can use pan the same way as before by clicking and dragging, but there's a couple of different ones on this one. You've got zoom window, which if you drag and left click, you can draw around a certain area and it will zoom into that. And you've also got fit, which just zooms you back out to that first point. So I'm just going to use zoom window in order to zoom in on just this section here. So on my detail view, you left click to specify the center of your boundary, and then left click again to drop the outside of that window. So I'm going to use fit again just to zoom back out, and I'm going to drop this view just over here. But because this is zooming in to such a small detail part, I'm going to change my scale factor, and I'm going to go with 5:1 for this. So that's quite large, but I'm just going to stick with that. And I'm just going to name this 5mm jack because that's the part that it is. I'm just going to drop that and drag it to one side. Again, because this title's overlapping slightly, I'm just going to drag that and just put it so it's out the way of that model. So now that we've got those alternative views, I'm going to move on to showing you the next thing, which is adding geometry symbols and dimensions. So because this page now is quite full, what I'm going to do is in the bottom left, I'm going to select quick add and just add a new drawing sheet. Again, similar process. I'm just going to add a base view. I'm going to set the orientation to right, and I'm just going to drop this here in the middle. But I'm going to change our scale factor to 1:1 just to show this a little bit differently. So now that we've got our drawing, we can then start adding some geometric symbols to this. So if we move over into geometry, we've got center line and center mark. So I'm not going to insult anyone's intelligence here, but the way to add these is to left click on one edge, then on another, and it'll just add that center line between those two edges. The next one is a center mark. So this is doing the exact same thing, but with a circle or an arc. So I'm just going to select these two buttons, and it's just going to show me where the center point of those two circles is. So the final geometry symbol that I'm going to show you is the center mark pattern. So this just shows you if certain components have been added or spaced out in a pattern. So the first thing it's asking me to do is to select some components that are involved in that. But it also has autocomplete selected. So what this does is Fusion tries to read where you might have a pattern, and it tries to generate where that next point will be. So I'm just going to leave autocomplete off just for now. And then what I'm going to do is select these screws. And what I can do then is generate the fact that these are all within a pattern, and it shows where they are. I can also add a center mark to show the center of where that pattern is. And then I'm just going to click OK there. And it's now got some geometric symbols for where those components are placed. So next, we're going to move into dimensions. This is where we start to add some information on the sizing. So if you go to the dimensions drop-down panel, you've got dimension, which automatically generates what it believes to be the most appropriate one. But what I'm going to go with is linear dimension. So this is just a linear edge, such as this top one. And all you have to do is zoom in. It's going to be a bit of a nightmare to find that edge, but select one endpoint, pan it across, and select your other endpoint. So this is a nice even 200 millimeters. So now that I've added this, if you press escape just to go off that dimension tool, if this is positioned in a place that later on decide isn't quite right, again, left click, and you can drag the number left and right. Or if you use these ones in the corners, you can drag where that dimension itself actually ends. So the next dimension then, if we go to our dimensions panel, is an angular dimension. So anything with some sort of curve or angle, we can then add a dimension that goes with that. Again, just by left clicking where the angle starts and where it ends. And then the next one, just flying through these quickly, are radius and dimension. So both of these work in the same way. So I'm only going to show you one of them. So I'm going to go with diameter dimension. So if we zoom in again to one of our circular components, just left click on the edge of it and we can add that diameter. So there's our nice little diameter symbol there, which it's quite sad to say is my favorite symbol from the drawing environment. So the final dimension to show you is a baseline dimension. So baseline dimension and chain dimension are quite similar. It's basically adding separate dimensions along the same path. So I'm going to go for baseline dimension. So for this, what you do is you select an existing dimension, and then you pick separate points along your model just to add dimensions along that path. So I'm just going to select a few random points and then just press enter once I'm finished. So you'll see that these dimensions fall outside of that existing dimension. So I'm just going to drag these and just drop them further down just so it has this nice tiered approach. Last one, and that will do for dimensions. So the next one is you can also add different text notes. These all work in a similar way. You select what it is that you want to highlight, and then you drop where you want that to be and just write in what you'd like it to be. So I'm just going to do button, just keep it nice and simple. You can also add symbols to go with it, so maybe a position symbol, and then just click close. Moving along again, you can also add some different manufacturing information using these symbols. So each of them work in quite a similar way. You click the feature that you're highlighting, and then you provide some manufacturing information to go with it. So I'm just going to go for surface texture just as an example. I'm going to select this edge, and then you just pick points along that path, click the tick. So first requirement, let's just say I want this to be sandblasted. So let's just concentrate on my spelling. There we go. And you can also change the symbol that's there as well. So it's quite similar on each one, but obviously just with different information that you're going to provide. And then just click OK once you're finished. So now that this drawing has quite a lot of detail and quite a lot of information, just before we send it off and finish it, we can also change what's in this title block down the bottom right. So to do that, just left click on it once and then double click, and it'll allow you to change some of these information points. So you might want to give it a different title, you might want to have an approval date, you might want to have a document status. So to change these, just left click, type in what it is that you like and press enter. If you don't like what's been added, you can reset those properties, but if you do and you're finished, just select Finish Properties. So now that it's done, we can then export this drawing. So to do this, just click Export PDF at the top. You can choose to include all your sheets, just a certain amount, or a current sheet. And once you've done that, you can just click OK, and it will export that PDF where you want it to go. So this has been quite a whistle-stop tour of the drawing environment. But hopefully you picked up a few of those key skills that are going to allow you to create those drawings as part of the OCR coursework. Thank you for watching.